Just do this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Just here's the question, okay?
Uh-huh.
Just answer this. What is the meaning of life to you guys?
What is the meaning of life?
You go first, I'll follow.
Alright. I guess if we're going by the meaning of life, I think the best way to do it is the way Ben Shapiro lays it out in The Right Side of History in the first few chapters. He talks about the idea of the Greek philosopher Aristotle's idea of virtue, which is telos, which is fulfilling your purpose. Basically, a glass is virtuous because it can hold water. And if it doesn't fulfill the purpose of holding water, then it's useless. It is not filled with virtue.
Basic essentialism.
Yeah. So you could say that the meaning of life is to fulfill your purpose. And I'm not going to generalize a purpose for all of humanity, but I will say that the purpose that I have seen to find is I am driven towards getting a stable career, towards getting a house, and towards getting really just getting my life together, specifically so that I can take care of other people, so that I can take care of my future wife, so that I can take care of my future kids. And I feel like that is, in and of itself, meaningful and purposeful for me. And that's not to say that once I have a wife and kids, life will be fulfilled. It's the idea of taking care of other people for me that is fulfilling, and continuing to do that throughout my life until I die will be the fulfilling of my purpose, and therefore the finding of meaning for me.
Alright.
I'm in a bit of a different camp, but generally I'm led to the same conclusion, generally with deviation. Asking what the meaning of life is a very loaded question, because people have been asking that since the beginning of thought. If you're asking biologically speaking, then the meaning of life is actually very clear from a biological standpoint. The meaning of life is to create more life. The purpose of any living creature is to perpetuate its existence, and when its existence comes to an end, propagate more of itself to perpetuate the sustainment of life. Most mammalian creatures do this through basically sexual intercourse, reproduction. Life is perpetuated, and human beings in particular, we are born to essentially form a symbiosis with our environment and maintain that symbiosis through our continued development. So biologically speaking, that would be the purpose of life. We're talking conceptually, rationally. That's a more difficult question. Personally, I fall into the ideas of existential philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus. I personally believe that meaning is something that you have to derive from your actions, and that there is no inherent value to be found in just life. If you're just alive, but you're not doing anything at all, nothing, not even just something productive, if you're not doing anything, if you're just in a state of perpetual life, there's no point to that. Absolutely no point to that. Value tends to be found in your actions, typically in your actions of work. You have to, and the reason I say derive meaning is because you cannot create meaning. There's very, very few people that can actually create meaning in their own lives. Most people don't have the capacity to do it. You have to derive meaning from actions that you find meaningful to you. That's why people have inherent differences between each other. That's why we gravitate toward different things. We have the desire to flock to what we enjoy, to flock to what we think is interesting and what we find preferable. And through flocking to those things, we derive meaning from those things, because those things make us feel fulfilled. And happiness comes as a byproduct of that. So, in essence, if you're asking me to generalize it, I would say that the meaning of life is finding a way to enjoy it reasonably. The reason I say reasonably is that hedonism, while it works in the short term, has been proven not to work as a long-term life plan when it comes to meaning. And meaning is something that people desperately need in order to sustain themselves, otherwise they self-destruct. Typically, the stage of meaning works for every human being in essentially the same way. and I see it in a series of stages. First, you're born. You're born, and when you're born, you're given everything. Literally everything. Life gives you everything because you didn't exist before you were born. You had no experience of anything before you were born because you didn't exist. You're born. Life gives you everything, and it may not be good. You may be born in bad circumstances, but you still are given everything when you're born. And as you grow older, life starts slowing down. You start getting accustomed to things. And life is still giving you things. It's giving you a lot of new things, new experiences, new people, sometimes even material. But it slows down, and there are certain things that life will no longer give you. And it is then that you have to start working for certain things that you want, while life is still giving you the things that you have. And that is actually where meaning is found, in the work to achieve what you want. At a certain point, though, the amount that life gives you, it slows down to a point where it stops. So at a certain point, life stops giving you things. So you have to start working for everything. You have to start working for everything you possibly can. And you do that because you're still in the game. You want to keep going. Then, at a certain point, not only does life stop giving you things, but it starts taking them away. So you have to then work to keep what you have. No longer to just work for what you want, you have to work to keep what you have. And this is obviously a futile effort in a sense, but you keep doing it because you have to. What else are you going to do with yourself? You have to keep working. It's what gives you your purpose in life. It's what makes you feel fulfilled. But eventually life catches up to you. And life begins taking things away from you at a point where you can no longer adjust for that. But you still keep working because you want so desperately to cling on to what you have. And in the end, when life has taken almost everything from you, you typically look back on life in one of two ways. Typically. This varies obviously, but typically you look back at life in one of two ways. Either you look back at life as a series of regrets for the things that you were never able to do and for all that you lost, or you look back at life in a sense of security and content for all the people that you knew and loved and lost, and you look back in content for a life well lived. In either camp you fall in, death comes as the final stage because you are essentially rewarded. You're either rewarded for your efforts or you're given a release from your struggle. In essence, your work is over. And you can say, most likely, that you lived a meaningful life.
All right.
Oh,
I like that.
One quick interjection here.
Yes?
Sure.
One thing I noticed in both of our philosophies is that we assumed that you're born, you go through childhood, and eventually you experience adulthood. We assumed that you would be working. We assumed that you would actually be able to live a life and therefore be able to find meaning somewhere. Whether you derive it, whether you create it. The one thing we didn't address is that there are a lot of people who die at birth, who die in childhood, who die before they get a job, who die on the job. Ultimately, people who never actually find time to be able to discover, derive, or create meaning in their lives. And when you're asking what's the meaning of life, a lot of times people ask, well, what's the point of these people ever being born? And I don't think either of us have asked that question, or have answered that question.
That's actually a good point to bring up. This is a cockneyed phrase. Everyone knows it. It's actually kind of redundant at this point, a little cliche, but it's true. Life isn't fair. Sometimes things happen, and there's nothing you can do about it, and that's the tragic portion of life. To some extent, life is a tragedy. There's a lot of wonderful things in life. Many wonderful things. Like I said, when you're born, life essentially gives you everything. But life, to some extent, is a tragedy. For many people. And it just stems from the fact that it isn't fair. We aren't all born in the same circumstances, and sometimes we just die. And it doesn't make sense. And of course it doesn't make sense. We often think as people that life is like a movie. That there's a happy ending at the end, or a sad ending, but there's an ending that you can see in sight. That's not how life works. Fiction makes sense. Real life doesn't. And in life, sometimes things just happen, and there's nothing you can really do about it. And if you happen to die before you can achieve that meaning that so desperately drives you, then that's a terrible tragedy. An absolutely terrible tragedy. But if you die immediately after you get your meaning, well, when do you get your meaning? I mean, there's an old phrase that I remember, and it's that some people live more in 20 years than others do in 80. It's not the time that matters, it's the person. Obviously, you can die at 20, and people will say you'd hardly lived. It's a tragedy. But it's equally as possible that you lived a more fulfilled life than most people. I mean, who knows? Maybe at 20 you could have... At 20, you could do a lot in 20 years. At 20, you could have been a potential politician who was rising up in the ranks. You could have been a famous actor who worked in charity, like Cameron Boyce, who recently died.
I was gonna say, he lived
lovely kid. We could argue about his acting quality. It was Disney, of course, but he was a lovely kid. Had a lot of enthusiasm in his acting.
Well, he definitely could say he's done more than other people.
He has done more than a lot of people. He worked in several charities before he died, and he's worked on several films. He lived a very fulfilled life, certainly more fulfilled than us, I would say. And obviously, you don't speak ill of the dead, so people, you wouldn't. I doubt you'd hear anything bad about him. But even when the kid was alive, no one ever actively insulted him. No one ever said this is a shitty kid. People always valued him as a good person, and I think he was able to derive the meaning faster than most of us. And it's sad that he died. But I would say good for him that he was able to live as meaningful a life as he did at his age. But in regard to but he could very well be the exception, not the rule. Many people are born and they just don't have that same je ne sais quoi, that same quality of, well, I have to go out and do these things.
Right.
And it's just the way it is. Yeah. We're not all born in the same camp. Like I was saying earlier, some people are born rich, some people are born poor, some people are born short, some people are born tall, some people are born smart, some people are born to be college protesters.
There you go.
But we're not all born in the same camp.
Yeah.
And the type of person you are often determines the kind of meaning you'll derive in your life, if you derive any meaning at all. Some people just live an empty life. They live a life full of just hedonistic pleasure or aimless searching with no guidance, no ambition, no idea of what they want to do. And obviously, every person experiences a stage of that, but how long does that last?
Yeah. I feel like it's a matter of breaking a cycle, too.
Yep. So my take on the thing that I brought up with the idea of some people being born, some people dying tragically early without ever having the opportunity to do anything. From a physicist's perspective, one of the things that we can do in physics is we can measure through experimentation, through philosophizing, and through thought experiments, what the laws of nature are, or at the very least, what they should be in order for our reality to make sense. One of the things that we can never do is we can never understand why it is that the laws are the way they are. Why it is that the physical constants of the universe are not only drifting towards the heat death of the universe and the most entropic state that they possibly can, but at the same time are conducive to such complexities and such low entropy areas such as living organisms. We will never be able to understand why it is that the constants of nature are the way they are, that our universe is the way it is, and why it is that sometimes people die when they're born, sometimes people die young, sometimes people die unfulfilled. I think it's part of the absurdity of nature, and it's something that just needs to be accepted and lived with. I mean, it's not something that you can control. It's not something that you can fight. So why is it that you would spend precious time and energy worrying about that? Why is it that you would waste creative potential, in a sense, on something that you will never be able to affect?
I mean, it's literally the exact definition of absurdity. You're from a philosophical standpoint. technically speaking, that would be the exact definition of absurdity. You're screaming in to an empty force, expecting someone to scream back, but they never do. You're expecting a universe, a vast universe, wider than our understanding, to respond to your needs, when in reality it's most likely indifferent to your needs.
Yes.
It's by definition absurd. And the obsession over it is equally as absurd. The best we can do is just be the best we are. And, that sounds like a cop-out, but it's true.
Yeah, so fundamentally, I think the points that we touched on for the meaning of life, I talked about the idea of fulfilling purpose, my purpose in particular being preparing for having a future family, taking care of my future family until I die. I think that can all be encompassed in the idea of just loving people in general, which I actually have a very, what's the word? Solidified, codified, that's the word. Codified definition for what love is. That is a topic for a different day / recording.
Yeah.
In any case, he talked about... I feel terrible. I was playing with the lock the whole time. Ben, summarize what you said.
I was essentially talking about the essence of existential philosophy and and basic libertarian beliefs that you could just do whatever makes you happy.
Derive meaning. That's what it was.
Yeah, deriving your meaning from your actions. And obviously do that within reason. I mean, I didn't add the caveat then, but I feel like it's unspoken. Don't do something if it negatively impacts someone else.
Well, yeah.
Well, how do you define negative? Then you get into moral relativism and blah, blah, blah. That's a huge mess.
Fundamentally, swing your fist in any direction as long as you don't hit somebody in the face.
Yeah, essentially do whatever you like, do whatever you find meaningful. And if you can derive a sense of meaning and happiness out of that, then good on you. Like I was saying, if you're asking me to generally describe what I think meaning is, even though I don't think life has inherent meaning, what I think meaning is finding whatever you can, finding the best way you can to enjoy life.
Also, here's one last question to leave you with is, if there was a general answer across the board for everybody for what the meaning of life actually is, would it matter if you personally don't find that answer meaningful? I mean, think about it. If I told you that the answer to life, the universe, and everything was 42, and it just didn't make any sense to you, would it really matter that the answer to life, the universe, and everything was 42?
And if the answer was something less vague, if the answer was conclusively, I mean, you're a religious person, you could probably relate to this, but if the answer was conclusively, the meaning of life was to fulfill the will of God, that'd be a bit boring, wouldn't it? If that was conclusively the answer.
Sure.
No interpretation at all. So, that was the societal consensus on what the meaning of life was.
Right.
Wouldn't that be a bit boring?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, to be fair, philosophers have been told, there have been great philosophies that have been crafted within constraints that were even thinner.
Obviously.
Take Plato's allegory of the cave, the idea of these people who've been staring at a wall this whole time. One of them gets released.
And he sees the wider three-dimensional world around him. He comes back and tells his compatriots about it. They don't believe him because their whole world is just what they see projected on the cave.
Right. If that was our reality, and the meaning of life was staring at the wall of the cave, or rather, the meaning of life was what was behind us, I very much think that you can derive more meaning than exists in the environment that you're in. In the same way that you can be happy while also being poor or being sick, I find that you can derive meaning even when the actual meaning isn't necessarily as much as what you're making it out to be. In the same way that people who analyze literature will often overanalyze and find meaning where there is none.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's like when you have Did you ever see that episode of South Park, the Ballad of Scrody McBoogerball?
Please not
Yes.
not that again. Please, man, not that.
Boogerball.
So for anyone watching, if anyone ever watches this, essentially the premise of the episode is that the South Park boys are assigned to read Catcher in the Rye.
And it's on the banned books list.
It's on the banned books list, but they unban it to have the kids read it, that way they can get exposure to new ideas. And the kids actually read the book because they hear it's such a taboo thing, and they think it sucks. They don't understand all the hype about it. They don't understand why there's such mass societal interpretation of this thing being good. And they resolve to write a book that's absolutely terrible to prove that anyone can just do it. And then the parents find the book, they get it published, and everyone thinks it's this deep, profound piece of literature, when really it's just a bunch of 4th grade boys saying anything that popped into their head. I mean, they spent an entire chapter, they had an entire chapter calling, I'm trying to remember her name,
Rosie O'Donnell?
No, not Rosie O'Donnell. The woman that looks like a horse.
Oh boy.
What is her name?
Sarah Jessica Parker, that's it.
There you go.
They wrote it like an entire chapter of the book calling Sarah Jessica Parker ugly. And people thought it was some profound piece of literature that was open to such grand interpretation.
I don't know if I have to edit this out, but everybody listening, we're not saying she's bad, okay?
Look, I'm not saying...
I'm not gonna monetize this video, but
We're not saying that Sarah Jessica Parker looks like a horse.
Yes,
that was
yes.
how Ben remembered her.
Wait. For anybody watching, I'll introduce Ben later, but he says stuff like this, so anybody listening, I apologize.
Look,
we're not calling her a horse.
That isn't my opinion. That was the opinion set forth by Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park.
Okay, yeah, to be fair, that was their idea. Just for anybody watching this.
And as for her looking like a horse, the only reason I said that she looked like a horse is because Family Guy made a joke about that.
Hey.
Okay, again, so that's Family Guy's fault. So no coming after my video. Okay, I work hard for my stuff. So
excellent. So I think we've thoroughly answered what the meaning of life is and gone above and beyond the question.
And if you don't agree with us, great interpretation.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, you said part of it is what you enjoy, right? Well, what I enjoy is doing stuff like this. So. We're gonna do stuff like this, and we're gonna enjoy it, okay, guys?
Excellent.
I'm gonna force some of you guys, but we're gonna enjoy it. We're gonna find meaning, okay?
So you're just gonna force that onto me? So I can force anything I want onto you, right? By basic precedent.
Then maybe less interpretation needs to be.
Yeah. Well, anyways, thanks for anybody who's watching this. We'll see if this makes it past the.
Oh, don't you want us to answer more questions?
Not today. Well, we're gonna have to make this like a mini series.
Oh yes.
All right. Thank you.